This is the season of celebration of India's diaspora. Those who are outside the country, and the Divas is specially called the Bharatiya Pravasi Divas. And of course, the various advertisements have come out. Big, full-page advertisements, and all of them have a lot of adjectives to describe all kinds of things, celebrating the vibrant spirit of Indian diaspora, led by youth and inspired by heritage. Now, many of these words used are pretty inane, and one of the things that we must always remember is that whenever words like this, big and loaded with adjectives, are used, the reality will be very different. And therefore, this is the subject of my talk today. But before that, let me be done with a small snapshot, which is really totally different from some of the other things that I'm going to say. But I was pretty, shall we say, struck by some of the reports recently. And that is what is called the chasing of the American dream by able-bodied people from Punjab, sturdy guys, the age group of 18, 35 and so on. Now, what I noted was that they sell off their farmlands and spend as much as about 50 to 60 lakhs per head to get there illegally, without any papers, to America. That's chasing the American dream. They go through these routes. They walk miles. Sturdy guys, really. They walk miles, and then there are agents, of course, who will say, there it is, that's the border now. It could be the border through Mexico, or then of course all these borders are manned by border guards. Therefore, this route is littered with various kinds of dangerous possibilities. But they go on, and then most of them are able to get through, and then they present themselves to the final border office of the United States and say, here we are. Now, they give some excuse, we are fleeing from persecution or something like that. Of course, the US border guards know a lot about these things, so they take them in the buses that are waiting for them, they take them to the border office. A fraction of them are deported straight away to the airports of Punjab, straight away. No questions asked, just deport them. Others stay on in the hope that if they somehow get into the informal economy of the United States, as in various eateries and various things like that, their life would be made. Now, this chasing of the American dream is a quite recent phenomenon. Mainly these people are all pretty deficient in English. I would say their proficiency in English is poor. Their education level is not up to much. Maybe they have done their school level. This is the thing that is happening. And before I come to the main subject, I want to say that this whole question of Pravasis or migrants cannot be painted with one brush. It is a wide spectrum, many colored, that kind of thing, and we cannot just use words that meaningless words that can be seen in these slogans. Let's be done with it. Let's have a little bit of tolerance for all these slogans, which now have become the fashion. Now, the chief guest at the main ceremony in Orissa was the president of Tobago, if I remember right. In any case, it is from that part of the country, that part, Trinidad, Tobago, etc. The story of Indian immigrants, the first immigrants to those islands and those places, is a story most similar, very much similar to the slaves who were taken chained from various locations in Africa by ships to work at the sugar plantations in the New America. This story is no different. Slavery had been officially abolished in those islands. Remember, the British continued to be the masters of all those islands, and therefore they had what is called the indentured system, which is another name for slavery. And the indentured system, the essence of which is also the essence of slavery, that those who are taken there have no wages at all. They work with no wages. And maybe after a tenure of 5 or 10 years, they may have the option to go home. So, in about the year 1850 or so, hundreds of these people, Indians, were taken from these geographies, the Bihar, the Orissa areas, by the contractor who, of course, worked under the British orders. They were being taken to work in the plantations there in these islands. There also there were the sugar plantations, a lot of other plantations. And these people had a broad choice, but it is clear that the conditions in which they were pretty bad, and whatever they said was coming to them in some distant land was perhaps better. So they were packed into ships, packed closely into ships, loaded into ships, human cargo, sent to these islands. I said the comparison between slaves and these people, just listen to me. It took sometimes about 20 weeks to get there. That's quite a lot of time. And during this time, as they were packed there, thankfully they were not whipped as the slaves of Africa were whipped. Some of them, or maybe a good part of them, suffered from dysentery and other diseases on board the ship. As high as 20% of people from this country died on the way to these islands, and they were just thrown into the sea by the contractor. So by the time they reached the work spots, another 10% die on the way. This is the story. The rest of the people, and this time it was men, women and children. The whole people had been transported. That's the idea, that I mean, the British had a certain idea of these things. So none were left here. So they were taken like this, and they worked on these plantations, the sugar plantations. No wages, no hours of work, nothing. They worked and worked. It was merely just continue to live. So do not load them with all kinds of heritage and dreams. Have a heart. They were practically slaves. Only thing they could now be called indentured labor. After about 10 years of this, they were given a choice to go back home, but then they asked themselves, what is the meaning? Where do we go to? And therefore, they continued. This is about 1850, 1870. And then they got their independence around 1950 or so. And then over the years, generations and generations, and various things that happened after the independence, of course there will be changes. You're talking about 7 or 8 generations. And therefore, they all became assimilated in these countries. No wonder they all became at the top. Some of them became prime ministers. Some of them became foreign ministers. Some of them became big businessmen. This is their story of 8 to 9 generations. But this is granted. When a people like this are exported in this manner, they take something with them which we can call Indian. Their religion is very important. Remember, in these desperate times, they think of God, they think of religion. So there it was. That continued, their culture, their name, everything was there. And over the years, their temples, things like that came. So now, they are settled citizens of that country. They become prosperous, and many of these countries, Tobago included, export things to us. They are not impoverished or anything like that. They are exporters to us, and we also export to them. That is the picture of those islands from which the chief guest of the Pravasi Divas celebrations came. Almost the same holds good for the people taken in this very same manner from the regions of Tamil Nadu. Tamil laborers who were taken just like this to work in the rubber plantations in Malaya, the very same way. Very same way. They had no rights, they had nothing. They were hardly people from Tamil Nadu who worked on these Malaya, that area of plantations. They too were taken at about this time, and it is no great surprise that over generations and generations they also assumed great positions of importance. President of Singapore, Foreign Minister of Singapore, and so on. They too took with them their great affinity and loyalty to their religion and their culture, because that was the only thing that sustained them through suffering. And therefore, if you visit Singapore, Malaya, you find those multicolored temples that link them to the country of their forefathers and their culture. They too have risen in the ranks, in the civil services, and every manner of life. So, when we talk about these, particularly these geographies, we must remember the tremendous exploitation that was there at the beginning. That was how it is. They were also exported as commodities, practically as slaves. But the only difference between slaves who were taken, chained, and thrown into the boats, into the ships, from the different African ports to the sugar plantations, they were slaves, and after their hours of work, they were chained. This is the story of civilization. These two things are history. But there is a living exploitation that continues now. And that is my story. By the 1970 or thereabouts, what is called the Gulf boom and all that started. And those in Kerala, I can speak about Kerala because when we speak about the Gulf, the major portion of those workers are from Kerala. I know something of Kerala because I see them, I know them, I know what is going on. About that time, 1970 or so, that was the beginning of the Gulf boom. There was no employment here, and that is the beginning of things. Now, don't blame anyone because this is a chain in the economic development of a country. These are unskilled people who have just done their school leaving certificate. There is no employment, nothing at all, and therefore there was only one thing, there was no dream being pursued. They had to go to places like this in order that they can educate their children, they can send something home. And that is how this export of human labor started from Kerala to the Gulf countries. I am not talking about the prosperous businessmen and so on. I am talking about the story of exploitation of helpless Kerala labor because of the economic situation. You don't have employment, you don't have work, you don't have anything near them, and this is an opportunity for them. None of them were pursuing a dream. They knew that they were being exported. Everything was being handled by some broker, by some commission agent, who used to club these people together like cargo and send them over to various locations in what we now call the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, to various countries. From the very beginning till now, they work under what is called the Kafala system. That is more or less like law in those countries. And what is the essence of Kafala system? In one word, slavery. That is the word. The moment they reach the work spot, their passports are taken away by the sponsor. From now on, from then on, the sponsor owns them. owns them like cargo. This continues even now. They have no separate identity. As per the law there, the laws there, they have only the sponsor of that country, and whatever is done for them is they are the master. It is a master-slave relationship, no doubt about it. So, when you look at the wages of these people who have been exported as human cargo, human labor, because of the exchange rate differential, it is something that is much better than what they could have ever dreamt of in Kerala. And therefore, there they go, packed in buses and sent to the various work spots, and return to very crowded quarters where they can just, rest their backs. Only recently, about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a dreadful fire in Kuwait, which just burned and killed a lot of people, and they said it's a short circuit. This is emblematic of the conditions in which these workers, these laborers live. This continues even now. For God's sake, spare your eloquence and your slogans for them. They have gone into exploitative conditions because there is no employment. It is a direct consequence of economic reality here. Nothing could be more. This is all about unskilled labor who are there used up in construction sites. I know a thing or two about that. About a month ago or 2 months ago, a person whom I know, her brother's son fell from the construction site, and he was killed at the spot. No agency, no sponsor looked at him. His friends collected some money to put him in a box. His friends collected money for a flight of the body to his homeland. So that is the security that they have. That is the conditions in which they work. Please spare them these phrases of the vibrant and great heritage and all that. It is pure suffering, and they endure the suffering. Those who are skilled have no chance of employment here. That is a fact. Various analysts have said that the chances of employment for those who are not educated, who are just literate and who are just school leaving certificate and below are, maybe the chances are somewhat not too high. But the chances of getting employment here for the skilled people are almost non-existent. And therefore, I have to round up this part of the story by saying a 19-year-old girl, skilled, having a diploma in nursing, a professional to that extent. As a 19-year-old girl, she sought employment in Yemen. Today, her fate hangs in the balance. She has been sentenced to death. And there is no doubt that she is the victim of this transnational economic activity. Had there been opportunities or employment here for those like her, professional, in our country at this time, she would not have felt the necessity to go and after 15 or 20 years face a death sentence. The Medical Professional Association in the All India Institute of Medical Sciences has taken up a case, but then you're dealing with Yemen, where no one's writ runs, where no one knows whether there is a government. Let me just leave that part of the story by just concluding this assessment, saying that I'm not prescribing anything. I can't be prescriptive. I'm not a one-man think tank. I'm just being descriptive. But there is no doubt in my mind that all of them are victims of an economic reality. They don't make any choices of their own. The choices are made for them because of the economic reality. This is one part of the thing. But a most serious issue is that all this comes at a terrible price. The sociological, social impact of the near destruction of the family in Kerala society is going to haunt us for generations to come. The male of the house leaves, and everything, all responsibility goes to the female. The boys grow up, they see some remittances coming, and they choose extravagant ways. At one time, there were a string of motorcycle accidents of young people, 18, 19, and we looked at all of them. They had bought themselves a motorbike from whatever remittances that were coming and were generally showing off their newfound wealth and independence on the streets. This is only symptomatic of what has happened in Kerala society. Homes without a parent, without a male to guide the young. And that young includes boys and girls at an age where they require a role model. All that is gone. And the consequences of that will be seen for generations to come. For Kerala society is not the society that it was. One is reminded of the biblical quotation, "What doth it profit a man if he gains the whole world but suffers the loss of his soul?" In this case, what we have suffered is the loss of what is called the family. That has been disintegrated. In all the homes, or practically all the homes of these workers of Kerala. And that is a terrible price. you look at the economic history of all countries, this kind of suffering is there. So I do not at all think that this is special. But I do want to speak of them so that all of you will know that we must pay a price.